The call came at 3:12 a.m. The screen flashed a name I hadn't seen in nearly 3 years. Sierra, my older sister. Her voice cracked through the phone, raw and jagged like a blade slicing the silent night. Hazel? Is that you? Oh, God. Hazel, Dad's in critical condition. He had a massive heart attack. They said he might not make it through the night. I froze. The chill didn't come from the London weather, but from my chest, spreading through my body like melting ice. Seconds later, I was out of bed, hands trembling as I scrambled for clothes in the dark. Where is he? Which hospital? Who's with him right now? I fired off. St. Luke's in Denver. They took him to the ER. Mom's there, and Noah just arrived. But he keeps asking for you. Please, Hazel, come home. As soon as you can. My mind spun like a cyclone, but all I managed to say was, "Tell Dad I'm on my way." I hung up the phone and stood still for a moment in my 6th-floor apartment, my home for the past 3 years, as I rebuilt my life. In the living room, autumn fashion sketches were spread across the table. In less than a week, my debut show at London Fashion Week would take place, a milestone I had dreamed of since leaving Colorado. And yet, one phone call, one sentence, had pulled me right back to square one. That morning, dark circles under my eyes, I walked into Harrington & Co., where I worked as a lead designer under Helen, my respected and notoriously demanding mentor. "I have to go back to the US. My dad, he might not make it," I said, when she noticed the suitcase by my feet. "Hazel, do you understand? Next week is your official debut. You're not just stepping away from a position, you're stepping away from an opportunity most people never get." "I know," I whispered, like swallowing glass. "But I can't not go." 4 hours later, I was curled up in a cramped business class seat, a last-minute ticket bought with the final bit of savings I'd been holding on to for a year. The plane cut through thick night skies. I couldn't remember how many times I cried between flights, or how many calls I made to the hospital, none of which were answered or returned. During my layover in Chicago, a text popped up from an old number. Agnes, my elderly neighbor who once babysat me when I was little. "Be careful, Hazel. Something's not right. Don't believe everything they say." I called back instantly, but a strange man answered, saying she was resting and couldn't talk. When I asked for more details, he hung up coldly. By the time the plane touched down in Denver late in the afternoon, the western sky was blood red. My chest tightened like someone was squeezing it from the inside. It had been 3 years since I last came home, not out of resentment, but because I had promised myself never to let this family derail me again. I dragged my suitcase through the airport and spotted Noah, my brother, waiting. Tall, well-dressed as always, but with an oddly cold look in his eyes. "Hazel, you're finally here." "Where's Dad? I want to go to the hospital now." Noah hesitated, just a second too long. "Mom was hoping you'd stop by the house first, change clothes, have something to eat. The whole family's waiting." "No, I need to see Dad, now." Noah's car rolled out of the airport, slowly merging onto the highway heading south through the city. The soft yellow streetlights lit my face, weary and tense. "So, what room is he in?" I asked, gripping the strap of the bag where I always kept emergency medical documents. Noah stared straight ahead, pausing before replying. "Room 203, cardiology unit, St. Luke's." I said nothing more. Agnes's warning echoed in my mind like a fire alarm. "Be careful, Hazel. Something's not right." When the car pulled into the hospital parking lot, I jumped out and headed straight for reception. Noah called after me, but I only turned once to say firmly, "I'll go on my own. A doctor's sister doesn't need a tour guide." The light brown-haired nurse behind the computer desk looked up as I gave her the name. "I'm looking for a patient named Arthur Myers, admitted yesterday for a heart attack." She typed quickly, then frowned at the screen. "Myers? I'm sorry, ma'am, but we don't have any patient by that name in our system." I blinked, heat rising to my face in a wave of panic. Are you sure? Maybe he was moved to another department? They said he was taken to the cardiology wing. The nurse shook her head, more firmly this time. I've checked all inpatient records from the last 3 days. There's no one named Arthur Mayers, and room 203 has been empty since last weekend. I stood, frozen, my heartbeat pounding in my ears like a war drum. Part of me didn't want to believe what was becoming painfully clear, but my mind was already piecing it together. The warning from Agnes, Noah's cold hug, Sierra's evasive look during the call, and my mother's strange silence. I turned and walked out of the lobby, where Noah was still waiting outside. "There's no Arthur Myers here," I said bluntly. "Dad's not here." "You lied." Noah stiffened, avoiding my gaze. "This isn't the place to talk about this. Let's go home, Hazel. We'll explain everything." "No," I cut him off, my voice low but sharp like a knife. "I want the truth. Right, now." He glanced around, then sighed, as if he'd been carrying a boulder on his back for days. When he spoke again, his voice dropped. "Dad never had a heart attack. It was Mom and Sierra who thought it was the only way to get you to come home." I took a step back, as if I'd just been slapped. The air around me felt frozen. "You all made up a story about Dad dying just to drag me back here. For what? A family dinner?" Noah stayed silent. I turned and walked straight to a taxi. No further explanation needed. But then something struck me, and I turned back. Wait, is this about the inheritance, the trust fund Grandpa left? The flicker in Noah's eyes answered before his mouth could. I arrived at the old house on Maple Street just as night had fallen. My heart should have been aching from betrayal, but it was something else that gripped me. Suspicion. The house hadn't changed much, except for a new SUV parked out front, which I instantly recognized thanks to its vanity plate. BL4I Law. I remembered Blair, our family's lawyer. Well, he once scoffed in my face when I refused to sign the joint property development contract 4 years ago. Inside, the atmosphere didn't resemble that of a household recovering from a medical emergency. My mother, Linda Myers, hair neatly brushed, wrapped in a pearl-colored cashmere cardigan, was sipping wine like nothing had happened. "Hazel, you're home." "And Dad? Has he made it through the worst yet?" I stressed every word. A heavy silence fell across the room. Then Mom put down her glass without looking at me. "Your father is fine. You need to understand." "No." "You need to understand that I left everything. My career, my opportunity, all my savings, because I thought he was dying. And it was all some ridiculous play." Before I could walk away, the library door swung open, and out stepped my father. Arthur, holding a cigar, looking nothing like someone who had recently faced death. "Hazel, my daughter, you really came back." I stood in stunned silence, not because he was healthy, but because I knew in that instant, everything had been orchestrated. I bent my head toward him, and the light came on, and all of a sudden, I was no longer the naive little girl they once thought they could manipulate. I sat in the old dining room, once filled with laughter every Christmas. Now, it was the stage for a cold performance, with a script they had written long before I arrived. My father, Arthur Myers, didn't bother to hide the pretense. He sat across from me, legs crossed, swirling a glass of whiskey like he was negotiating a contract, not facing the daughter his entire family had just deceived. "Hazel," he began, his voice deep and formal, "you're the only one who can help this family get through this time." I didn't answer. I just looked at him. The man who used to take me fishing when I was in elementary school, who once hugged me the night I won my first scholarship. But now, his eyes reflected nothing but calculation and pressure. "You mean, get through it by handing over my entire inheritance to the company?" I said, enunciating every word. Sierra, my sister, glanced at Mom, Linda jumped in quickly, her voice soft but laced with urgency. "You're turning 30 soon, Hazel. Your grandfather's trust will release on your 30th birthday. That's less than 3 weeks away. This is a critical time for the company." I leaned back in my chair, slowly. A critical time, or more accurately, a make-or-break moment? Noah, my brother, tensed his jaw slightly, as if restraining something. I turned to him. "Noah, you're the CFO. Tell me the truth. What exactly is Walker and Myers facing?" No one answered. Only the ticking of the wall clock filled the silence. Finally, Arthur sighed. "Your grandfather always believed that only one person in this family had the guts to break free from the generational loop of real estate. That person was you." I remembered his will clearly, the one I had read with attorney Clinton Blair right after Grandpa died. According to it, my share of the inheritance, $6.5 million in cash, plus other fixed assets, would only be granted if I pursued a career outside the family's real estate business. And I had done exactly that. Left Colorado, started from scratch in London, and followed my passion for fashion design. Arthur continued, "Do you realize the company launched 12 new projects in just the past 2 years? We invested heavily in lakefront residential zones, shopping centers across the Midwest, but then came COVID, inflation, everything flipped upside down. We're running low on liquidity, investors are getting nervous, and now?" I raised an eyebrow. "Now you all remember me? After years of calling me the traitor to the family, I'm suddenly the last hope?" Silence. I stood up and walked to the window, staring into the backyard. The place that once had the wooden swing Grandpa built for me. Now it was nothing but dried grass and a pile of construction materials left abandoned. "And what if I say no?" I turned back. Arthur. My parents, my brother, and my sister remained quiet, a silence both terrifying and familiar. Finally, Sierra exhaled. "We'll lose everything. The house, our reputation, and we may face legal charges." I stepped closer, locking eyes with Arthur. "You're planning to take my entire inheritance and transfer it into Walker and Myers? Under what pretense?" At that, my mother slid a thick folder toward me, bound neatly in a black leather cover. "You'll become the majority shareholder. You'll invest your trust fund. After that, the company will transition into a limited family partnership. Everyone will share in the profits." I glanced through the terms. Beneath the polished language was a harsh truth. I would lose control, holding only a token seat on the board. A board dominated by Arthur and Noah. No guarantees. Nothing truly mine. Just blind faith that I'd obediently play along again. I closed the file and placed it back on the table. "I need time to think, and I want to speak with Grandpa's lawyer." "Tomorrow." Arthur clenched his jaw but nodded. "As long as you still know what really matters." I turned away without replying. I already understood what mattered most. My family didn't need me. They needed my money. And if they thought I was still as easy to manipulate as before, they had forgotten that the Hazel they once knew died at Heathrow Airport 3 years ago. The next morning, I woke up in my old room, the one once filled with high school sketches and the first designs I ever dared to dream would one day become fashion. Everything looked just as it had, as if I'd never left. But I was different. And I knew the people in this house weren't the family I once trusted anymore. In the kitchen, my mother was making breakfast. She smiled gently when she saw me. "You still like sunny-side-up eggs, don't you? I even made blueberry pancakes just like when you were little." I nodded stiffly. I wasn't here for breakfast. I was here to figure out what kind of trap I'd walked into. At 9 a.m., Clinton Blair, the longtime legal representative of the Myers family, arrived with a heavy leather briefcase. He was tall, thin, and always wore a smile as thin as tissue paper. "Hazel, it's so good you're back. I believe that with your return, everything can finally get back on track." "I'm here to listen, not to sign anything," I said flatly. Clinton nodded, then opened the case and pulled out a stack of papers bound in a yellow ribbon. The cover clearly read, Investment Agreement, Mayor's Trust Transfer. This contract would allow the full transfer of your inheritance from the trust directly into Myers Development Holdings, with you as the lead investor. You'd hold an 18% stake and a seat on the board. I skimmed the first few pages and immediately noticed something off. While the full $6.5 million from the trust would be transferred to the company, I would only receive a minority stake with no veto power and a representative seat without financial authority. 18%? Why not 50 if I'm the sole investor? I asked, not bothering to hide my fury. Arthur chimed in, trying to maintain a calm tone. We need a flexible management structure to handle the current crisis. Centralized power would make operations harder. Let's be honest, I cut in. You want me to hand over the money, then sit quietly while the company sinks further under Noah's watch? The room fell dead silent. Clinton gave a polite cough. You're welcome to review it and sign later if you feel it makes sense. I folded the file and slid it into my handbag. I'll take it with me, and I'll have my own lawyer review it. I hope that's not a problem. Clinton's expression tightened slightly, but he forced a smile. Of course. Though we do need a decision soon, the financial situation is quite urgent. I looked him straight in the eyes. Exactly. And that's why I can't rush this. That afternoon, I slipped into my father's old office, where he used to keep his project files. It had been tidied up, but a few folders still sat on the shelves. I quickly snapped photos of mortgage loan documents, project breakdowns, and one file boldly labeled Private Investor HE Capital. That evening, while the rest of the family prepped for the big reunion dinner, I quietly called Mrs. Agnes, the elderly neighbor who had first warned me. Hazel, thank heaven you called. Things are falling apart, she whispered. Your father's mortgaged nearly everything. The house, the office, and that so-called strategic partner, they're loan sharks disguised as investors. M Capital, I asked. That's them. They're notorious. If they can't get their money, they'll take everything else. My heart skipped a beat. That night, I sat at the long dining table where all the familiar dishes were laid out. Mom's pan-seared salmon and a bottle of red wine reserved for rare occasions. Sierra, dressed in a sleek black dress, tried to act composed. Hazel, even though pretending Dad had a heart attack was wrong, the intention wasn't. We need you. The whole family needs you. No, I replied. You need my money. Don't confuse family with financial strategy. The air around the dinner table thickened. I continued. I know Mom sold Grandma's vintage jewelry set, and Dad borrowed money from H Capital, whose name is under investigation in at least 3 states for funding fake development projects. What are you talking about? My mother snapped. I'm talking about the truth, and if you still have a shred of conscience, you should add the part you know. Linda went silent. But in her eyes, for the first time since I came back, I saw something that looked like regret, even if only for a second. I stood up and looked at all 3 of them. I haven't signed anything, and I won't. At least not until I know everything. Not because I don't trust you, but because I did once. And I won't be that fool again. I walked away, leaving behind a cold dinner and 3 people who were beginning to realize the old Hazel no longer existed. That night, I returned to my room, locked the door, drew the curtains, and sat at my laptop. I opened my bag, pulled out the folder Clinton had handed me that morning, flipped through each page, and marked the shady clauses with a red pen. One detail made me pause. In the contract's appendix, it mentioned adjustments to the trust charter per legal counsel recommendation in 2018. I knew exactly what that meant. 2018 was the year my grandfather passed, and his personal attorney, Mr. Lewis Grant, was the only one still holding the original will and trust documentation. I called Mr. Grant's old number. To my surprise, he still remembered me. Hazel? Good heavens. You were my entire Saturday mornings back in the day. Are you all right? I need to confirm something about my grandfather's trust, I said quickly. They told me I could sign over the assets to the company even before my 30th birthday. Who told you that? He asked, voice suddenly sharp. No one, not even your father or the company's lawyer, has the authority to touch a single penny from that trust before your 30th birthday. The trust is protected by special clauses. Walter insisted on it himself. They're pressuring me to sign an investment agreement, transferring everything into the company. They say it's for the good of the family. Mr. Grant sighed. Hazel, if they manage to get you to sign while you're misinformed or under pressure, that could be fraud. But don't worry, the trust includes a safeguard clause. If there's evidence that you were coerced, the funds automatically transfer to charitable organizations instead of to whoever pressured you. Light sparked in my mind. They weren't just deceiving me. They were gambling with something they didn't even have control over. That night, I decided to do something I'd avoided for the past 3 years. I reached out to Ryan Carter, my ex from college, now a financial investigator working for the Colorado State Office of Transaction Oversight. My message was short. Ryan, it's Hazel. I need help. Not for me, but to stop something worse. Financial, serious. 10 minutes later, he called back. His voice was still warm like I remembered, but now steadier, more guarded. Talk to me. I laid everything out in under 5 minutes. The asset transfer documents, the sketchy contract, the loan from HE Capital, and most importantly, how they faked my father's illness to lure me home. They're trying to take nearly $7 million of inheritance money to cover the hole they've been digging for the past 3 years. Ryan was quiet for a moment. That sounds like potential fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, maybe even money laundering. If there's a link to an illegal lending operation, can you help me investigate? I can't launch anything official unless there's a formal complaint, but I can connect you with someone who can track things. In the meantime, you need to protect yourself. Record every conversation. Take photos of every document. And Hazel, don't let them know you're suspicious. You're walking a tightrope. The next morning, I met with Mrs. Agnes at the Lakeside Cafe where I used to work as a waitress when I was a teenager. Only now, I sat there in a neutral-toned wool coat and sunglasses, as if I were on a covert mission. She didn't come alone. Hazel, this is my granddaughter, Julia. She's a private investigator, not some noir stereotype, but a former FBI agent now freelancing in financial investigations. Julia was a woman in her 30s with a pixie haircut and a sharp-clipped voice. I'll need a copy of the contract, the company name, the investor's name, and as much original data as possible. I handed her the scanned contract, photos of income and expense sheets I found in Arthur's office, and a list of emails Clinton had sent my mother, who had a habit of printing out every email and leaving them on her desk. Julia skimmed quickly, then nodded. HE Capital is linked to at least 3 lawsuits in Arizona and Oregon. They've done anonymous lending through shell companies based in the Cayman Islands. What about my family's company? Mayer's Development Holdings has 3 offshore accounts, at least one of them in Belize. There's not enough evidence for money laundering yet, but the rapid capital movement, combined with what looks like a Ponzi-style investment model, definitely raises red flags. I gripped my coffee cup, fingers icy cold. Julia continued. I'll collect more evidence, but Hazel, you should set up a secure account, store files, recordings, documents, just in case. I understand. I'll do it tonight. That evening, I created a secret cloud folder named Fireproof. For justice. I uploaded everything. Photos, phone call recordings, a video of my mother admitting she sold the heirloom jewelry, a clip of Arthur on a call with a mystery man discussing needing just 3 more weeks, and a recorded conversation with Clinton where he accidentally said, "Once Hazel signs, everything will be smooth." Once the upload was complete, I locked the folder, with a password only I would know. Walter was right. My grandfather once told me before he passed, Family should be the safest place. But if one day it becomes the most dangerous, then you're the one who has to save it. I never thought those words would become the guiding light for the biggest battle of my life. And I was ready to fight. I started performing. At every meal, I nodded along as Dad rambled about the bright future of Meyer's development. I asked naive questions about potential returns, pretending to be a clueless girl hearing the phrase diluted shares for the first time. My mother gently touched my arm in the kitchen, whispering, "We're all just afraid of losing you," while Noah took me to tour a half-finished construction site. Cold concrete blocks in the middle of a field that once held our family farm. I pretended to care, pretended to be touched, pretended to be unaware. In truth, I was recording everything. Every promise Clinton made about future returns, every word my father uttered during a suspicious call with someone from HS Capital, all of it went straight into the fireproof folder, now encrypted, backed up, and a copy sent to investigator Ryan Carter. On the third afternoon since I returned, my father hosted a family meeting at the main estate in the Boulder suburbs, a place only opened during Thanksgiving in the past. This time, he invited the entire extended family. Uncle Harold, Aunt Jean, and a few cousins I'd never been close to. The atmosphere felt like a pre-scheduled victory party. On the long walnut table, Clinton Blair laid out 2 document folders, copies of the investment agreement and signature templates. I saw that Dad had already placed his Mont Blanc fountain pen next to them, an unmistakable sign that they thought I was about to fold. I sat down, keeping a polite smile. Clinton spoke first. "Hazel, you're a smart woman. The family's thrilled about your decision to partner with us. Just one signature here, and we all step into a new chapter, together." I looked at him, then slowly turned to face my parents. "Yes, but before I sign, I'd like to hear the entire content again, clearly from the mouth of the legal representative, just to make sure no one misunderstands any clause." My father frowned. "You've already heard Clinton explain it several times, Hazel. No need to repeat." "I just want to be sure," I interrupted, my voice still sweet. Clinton gave a reluctant nod, pulled out a stack of papers, and began reading through each clause. I placed my phone on the table, pretending to check messages, but I was actually recording the entire signing session, and more importantly, signaling a cue. As soon as he read the line, transferring the full trust fund value of $6.78 million into the company in exchange for non-voting shares and a 10-year lock-in period, I tapped the send button on a message. Ready. Just a few minutes later, the doorbell rang. My mother was about to stand when the front door swung open. Without warning, 4 people in black suits entered. Behind them were 2 agents in FBI uniforms, followed by 3 representatives from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, and finally Ryan, his expression cold and unreadable. "Mr. Arthur Myers," a woman with deep brown hair stepped forward, holding up her badge. "I'm Federal Agent Lydia Shaw. We have a warrant for search and arrest in connection with allegations of financial fraud, illegal fund transfers, and unauthorized manipulation of investment assets." The living room fell into complete silence, as if time had frozen. Then came shouting, protests, and chaos. "What? This is a mistake!" Arthur yelled. "I'm a victim of market instability. I didn't deceive anyone." "It's all been recorded," Ryan replied calmly, "including your faked illness to pressure your daughter into signing an unlawful agreement." What have you done, Hazel?" Clinton stammered, clutching the file folders. "Only to be blocked by an SEC agent." "I'm just protecting what my grandfather left me," I said clearly, "and the people who believed in this family." Clinton was handcuffed first, a lawyer turned accomplice in a large-scale financial fraud. My mother collapsed into a chair, pale and shaken, no longer able to maintain the composed elegance of a gala hostess. Arthur resisted, but was ultimately cuffed, read his rights in front of the entire extended family. Noah didn't get away either. His arms were pulled behind his back as investigators seized his laptop, which contained multiple falsified balance sheets. Only Sierra, who had acted as the family's PR face, was kept behind for questioning. She wasn't arrested due to insufficient direct evidence, but she looked at me with a hollow gaze, not hatred, just collapse. Resignation. I stood in the center of the room, my hands trembling slightly. But my eyes never blinked. At no regrets. Because I knew this wasn't just a counterstrike to protect an inheritance. It was the final act to break the cycle of deceit my family had orchestrated for years. A cycle that seemed unbreakable, until the one they treated as a pawn flipped the table. 2 weeks after the FBI and SEC raided the house, I stood outside the Boulder County Courthouse, watching the quiet stream of people leaving the first hearing. No one looked at me with blame. On the contrary, most nodded politely or offered a slight bow, as if to say silently, "Thank you for doing the right thing." I recognized a few faces, former employees, old neighbors, even an elderly couple who had invested their entire retirement fund into a now abandoned lakeside project. I didn't come for revenge. I came to end the fraud that had been the foundation of my family's empire, and I did it my way. My inheritance, nearly $6.8 million from my grandfather's trust, was released exactly on my 30th birthday. But I didn't spend it. With help from my private attorney and Ryan, I launched a restitution fund for victims defrauded by Myers Development Holdings. Investors, underpaid staff, unpaid contractors. I transferred $3 million into the fund in the first week, most of it going toward emergency relief for those hit the hardest. I kept the remainder to rebuild my life and prepare for better things ahead. I appeared at a small press conference outside the courthouse, publicly apologizing on behalf of my family and pledging that all documentation had been handed over to authorities, with no one escaping due to connections or social status. The media coverage exploded. Daughter exposes family real estate empire, donates full inheritance to victims. Hazel Mayers from outcast heir to symbol of financial justice. I didn't care about fame, but I felt free. For the first time in years, I could finally breathe. The official trial took place 3 months later. Arthur Mayers, once the leader of more than 20 construction projects, was sentenced to 17 years in federal prison for crimes including investment fraud, falsifying financial records, and manipulating trust assets. He sat there in an orange jumpsuit, his hair noticeably grayer after just a few weeks in custody. When the judge allowed him a final statement, he looked only at me and said, "Everything I did was to protect the Myers name." I didn't respond, not out of anger, but because I understood, to him, reputation mattered more than justice. My brother Noah received a 9-year sentence, lighter due to his late cooperation, but the evidence of his falsified financial reports and embezzlement from company accounts was undeniable. Noah hadn't looked at me once since his arrest. Perhaps in his mind, I would always be the traitor. My mother, Linda, was sentenced to 2 years of house arrest, thanks to her cooperation and valuable documentation of secret investor meetings. I knew she wasn't entirely innocent, but I also knew that, in the end, she chose to stand with the truth rather than the lies. She sent me a handwritten letter after the verdict. "Hazel, I was wrong, many times, but I hope that one day you can forgive, not for me, but for your own peace." I keep that letter in my nightstand drawer. I haven't replied, but I haven't thrown it away either. Clinton Blair, the once proud attorney who held his head high for professional ethics, was permanently disbarred and now faces a 5-year suspended sentence, along with a court order banning him from participating in any financial institution going forward. As for Sierra, my sister. She was the only one temporarily released during ongoing investigations. Her role had been softer, mainly as the family's communications and PR bridge. Still, remaining silent while knowing the truth led to public reprimand and complete loss of credibility in the real estate industry. 3 months after it was all over, I received a phone call from Mr. Lewis Grant, my grandfather's former attorney. "Walter would be so proud of you, Hazel. You kept your promise, even when no one stood with you." I didn't respond immediately. I was standing inside a renovation site, once the abandoned land of the old company. Now it was being transformed into a legal aid and community financial support center, where local residents could receive free advice on business law and financial literacy. Beside me was Mrs. Agnes, still spry at 78, instructing a group of college interns on how to audit documents for transparency. "Hazel," she turned to me, "you didn't just tear down a fraudulent empire, you're building something greater. Trust." I smiled. I couldn't have done it alone, but I had people like you, and a grandfather who never gave up. I turned and looked out across the fields, a place I once thought I'd never return to. But now, I knew, this was where my story truly began. A year after the trial concluded, a new sign was hung in front of what was once the Myers Development Holdings headquarters. The Phoenix Foundation, Center for Community Renewal and Ethical Finance. The name wasn't random. I wanted it to remind everyone, including myself, that even when you rise from ashes, you can fly again, not for revenge, but to repair. The Phoenix Foundation was established using the remainder of my inheritance, combined with donations from the community and several sustainable development grants. We started by finishing abandoned projects left by Myers Development: rural schools, healthcare clinics, affordable housing. But unlike the old ways, every contract now was transparent, and every dollar publicly accounted for. And most importantly, everyone involved got paid, fairly and fully. I didn't run it alone. Mrs. Agnes held an honorary seat on our advisory board, while Julia, the private investigator, was now our director of financial compliance and transparency. We even hired individuals who had been victims in the case, training them and giving them a second chance at life. In October, I returned to London for the first time in nearly 2 years. My small apartment in Battersea still held the familiar scent of old wood and silk fabric. I unpacked my bags under the soft autumn light spilling across the wooden floor, feeling like I had never left. A message popped up on my phone. "Harrington, the former boss from Harrington Fashion House. I heard what you did back in the States. If there's still room in your heart for fashion, meet me at the new studio. I'm looking for a partner, not just for talent, but for integrity." We met in Soho, in a small design loft on the 3rd floor of an old building. "You've gone farther than anyone I've ever known," Marion said as I stepped in. "But you're still the Hazel I remember. The one who would restitch every seam until it was perfect, even on a sample coat." I laughed. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. And when Marion laid out her plan for a sustainable, ethical fashion line, one that didn't exploit labor, I didn't hesitate. I agreed to be her partner. That winter, I received a handwritten letter from my sister Sierra. After everything that had happened, I wasn't sure I could still call her family. But the letter was short, simple, and sincere. "You don't owe me anything, but I want you to know I'm working with a group that helps formerly incarcerated women rebuild their lives. The same skills I once used to manipulate, I now teach them to use in court to earn a second chance. If you're open to it, keep in touch. Not because I want things to go back to how they were, but because I'm learning how to become someone new." I didn't reply right away, but I saved her email address. A few weeks later, I sent a short message. "Every real change begins with the courage to admit you were wrong. I hope you keep going." Since then, we've stayed in touch, sparingly, cautiously, but honestly. I never imagined I'd step inside a prison. But the following spring, I found myself at the Federal Correctional Facility for Women, holding an old photograph. Me and Mom in front of an ice cream truck, my chocolate cone melting all over my hand, and her smiling like the sun. Linda Myers was now a thinner woman, hair graying, wearing her inmate uniform. But when she saw me in the visitation room, she looked like she couldn't believe her eyes. "Hazel." I sat down, silent, We stared at each other like two strangers who used to be close, neither knowing where to start. In the end, she spoke first. I used to think you were the thorn in this family. Now I see. You were the only one who protected its dignity. I gripped the photo in my hand. For years I'd longed to hear a single acknowledgement, not from a perfect mother, but from one who could admit regret. "And why didn't you stop Dad?" I asked. "Because I was afraid. Afraid of losing my place, afraid of what people would think. But the deepest fear was facing my younger self, all those dreams I never dared to live. But you lived. You chose. And I paid dearly for it," I said softly. "But you never lost yourself," she whispered. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. Some things are said best in silence and an honest look. I never visited my father. Not once. Not a letter. Not a question. I no longer held resentment. I just left him in the past. Because I knew, to live a new life, I had to let the old one rest. 3 years after I signed the form refusing to transfer my trust to the family, I stood on the rooftop of the Phoenix Foundation headquarters in Boulder, watching the city glow under the golden hue of an October sunset. The autumn breeze swept through my hair like a familiar whisper, not the chill of painful memories, but the calm of a journey coming full circle. That afternoon, we had just opened the Community Financial Recovery Center, a 2-year project built on the land once belonging to the failed Horizon Grove development, what my father and brother once pitched as the golden dream for investors. Today, it was real, not just bricks and clean paperwork, but filled with real people, parents, students, retirees, seeking ways to live more responsibly with their finances. I leaned down to straighten the brass plaque etched with a quote I had written myself. "An honest decision always comes at a cost, but trust is priceless." I split my life between 2 cities. Boulder, where I found myself again, and London, where I never stopped being a designer. Marion and I had launched the first collection from our brand, Loom and Light, a sustainable fashion line using recycled materials and partnering with small workshops across Southeast Asia and South America, places where workers were paid fairly and treated with respect. When the Ashes of Silk gown, my design inspired by Rebirth, debuted at London Fashion Week, I sat front row, quietly wiping away tears. Not for glory, but because I knew I had come to the end of a journey, losing no one, except those who had chosen to lose me. I still keep in touch with my sister, Sierra. Our letters aren't frequent, but they're sincere. Recently, she told me she had been hired as an advisor for a re-entry program in Oregon, helping formerly incarcerated women rebuild their lives with communication and personal finance skills. "I never thought I'd thank you for exposing everything," she wrote. "But now I'm grateful, because I finally get to live a life not built on appearances, but on doing what's right." I smiled when I read those lines. I'm not sure if my family, as I once knew it, still exists. But I know this: honesty has brought out better versions of us all, even from the wreckage. I never heard from my father again. After the 17-year sentence, he cut all contact. No letters, no message. I once thought that would hurt me, but it didn't. I understood him better than anyone else. To him, being exposed by his own daughter was the ultimate failure, not in a legal sense, but in terms of honor. I no longer carry resentment. Instead, I let go. Because I've learned that sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean erasing the memory. It means not letting it control your future. One Sunday afternoon, I returned to my grandfather's small wooden cabin, tucked deep in the pine forests of northern Colorado. It's now a retreat for social workers and retired teachers. I sat in the old rocking chair where he used to tell me childhood stories. In a worn drawer, I found the leather notebook he'd left behind, the blue ink fading with time. "My true legacy isn't money. It's you. The one who stood in the fire and kept the light in your heart." I closed my eyes, letting the wind brush my cheek, imagining him beside me. No words, just warmth. A quiet recognition I'd waited for my whole life. I had once been the girl who ran away, branded a traitor. I had once been the only child who returned to the trap to protect the last shred of our family's honor. And now, I am a woman living with integrity. Not perfect, but honest. I didn't keep much from the inheritance. Most of it was used for restitution, rebuilding, and helping others rise from the damage my family caused. But what I've kept, forever, is the freedom of choosing my own path. And maybe that's the greatest legacy my grandfather ever gave me. Now, I want to ask you, the one reading my story, if one day you discovered that the people you love most were willing to destroy you to protect something wrong, would you forgive? Or would you rise? Would you stay silent? Or would you speak out, even if it cost you everything? Life isn't always black and white, but sometimes in a single decision, everything can change forever. I'm Hazel Myers. I made my choice. What about you? Hazel's story is a powerful reminder that honesty and courage always matter, even when it means standing up to your own family. In the real world, where money and reputation often overshadow ethics, choosing justice, even at the cost of loneliness or pain, is still the right choice. The greatest legacy isn't wealth. It's the strength to live by your conscience and to inspire others to do the same. That's the true power of one person. Thank you for following Hazel's journey. If you found this story meaningful, please hit like, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more real emotional stories.